A swan neck regulator is used to make a precision adjustment on the index. Our swan neck regulators are made of hardened stainless steel. We grunge polish the underside of the piece. Next, we do a slight bevel under the piece. Then, the sides are pulled around the circumference of the piece. Then we make an angle all the way around the piece, which we'll polish. Next, we'll make 2 rough chamfers in the holes and then polish them to end up with a block polishing on the top.
Here we have a swan neck spring, which we're going to decorate. The first step is to grunge polish it from top to bottom with an emery stone, while it's positioned on a cork. The softness of the cork allows the piece to remain upright. I start making circles while pressing lightly. As there is a relief on the blade of the spring, we'll do the rest with the buff stick very gently. We'll also do the grunge polish of the underside. Turn it over and do the same on top. After grunge polishing the top and the bottom, we'll break the angle on the underside. I simply use a file that I've sharpened myself to break the angle under the piece. It's really a very small angle. No need to spend too much time on it. For convex angles, I use a sageleaf file. For concave angles, I use a flat diamond file. And we're going to break the angle all the way from the spring to the blade. Here is a support made for the swan neck. It allows us to hold the swan neck in place. We're simply going to fix it with the 2 screws. We screw in the first screw. We simply put this support in the chuck to hold the piece.
On va mettre tout simplement dans le mandrin. Pour maintenir la pièce. Voilà, comme ça nous permet.
This allows us to get a good grip on the piece so we can proceed with other steps.
On a une bonne prise pour faire de l'anglage de la pièce.
We'll do the sides once the piece has been placed on its fixture. I generally use two tools. It is either a buff stick of 20 microns, which is a fairly strong grain that will really remove the material from the piece, or an iron stick with a lapping paste to do the edges. I start with the buff stick. The aim is to remove all traces of machining that were on it before. We're going to make horizontal strokes all around the surface of the piece. As my buff stick has less and less grain, I simply use a cutter to remove the surface that has been used.
Pour enlever la surface qui a été utilisée.
To get a new layer of emery.
De nouveau un papier d'émery neuf.
Or you can use an iron stick. We'll use a file to trim it.
Le tailler. Voilà. On vient simplement
Put some lapping paste on the stick.
rôder sur le fer.
It's this paste that will really attack the material. Once we've done the sides, we'll tackle the corners. We'll start with the largest to the finest grain buff sticks. I start with 20 microns. We'll simply use the tool on the corner and start rubbing with it. And we'll move both the tool and the piece to pierce the angle. This is to make a well-rounded angle, which allows the reflection to last much longer on the piece than if it were all flat. We're going to rock this piece a little while using the buff stick. We make circles. This is also to remove the machining marks. We've done it with the buff stick of 20 microns. Now we're going to proceed with 9 microns, which is a little softer. And then with 5 microns. The corner already has a slightly shiny appearance. We finish with the finest, the 3-micron buff stick, still using the same movements. To finish, we clean the piece. Then we'll finish off with wood. We'll start with a 1-micron polishing paste. This will remove the last little marks from the buff stick, the little scratches. The last step is to use wood, but with a much finer paste of 1/4 of a micron. This last paste will give the corner a shine, always pouring the angle. Now we're going to make the rough chamfer of the screw holes. We'll use a ball nose milling cutter to prepare the angle and turn it gently. You have to be careful not to cut too much, otherwise it will ruin the angle you've already made. We're going to make a very small angle. We'll finish polishing the rough chamfers with a micromotor tool and a piece of wood. We're going to recut the piece of wood a little. I'll take what's called a cup burr of the right diameter so that it makes a nice round shape. I need to shape the wood. I did the chamfer with a diameter 1 ball nose milling cutter, and the polishing will also be with a diameter 1 wood end milling cutter. Once the wood is well shaped, we'll take the 1 micron paste. We'll add it to the wood and gently work it on the chamfer. Not for very long, to polish the screw hole. I start with the 1 micron paste. I remove the residual paste. I can see that the wood has been deformed once again, so I reshape it with the cup burr. It needs to have a well-round shape. I use a finer paste to give it that final shine. I'm going to clean the piece. I make light circles with the wooden tip. Now we're going to tackle the last stage, the block polishing. First, we'll clean the piece to make sure it's as clean as possible. I'm used to cleaning it with alcohol, but you can also clean it in a benzene cup. We'll take a zinc block and clean it with a cloth. I scratched it beforehand so that the polishing paste can get into these scratches. The piece will be repolished by the paste from these scratches. First, I'm going to use the 1 micron paste to remove the biggest scratches. When there are only small micro scratches left, I'll move on to the finest paste of 1/4 of a micron. I spread it well on the zinc block. I make a really thin layer of paste and spread it really well. I don't use too much of it. I put the piece against it.
Et là, avec le support en caoutchouc, je vais venir poser sur la pièce et faire des cercles très légers. Et on sent vraiment bien que la pâte elle va commencer à accrocher et puis enlever les plus grosses rayes. Voilà pour vérifier.
To check the result, I clean the piece in the alcohol.
Dans l'alcool.
I'm going to clean it thoroughly. There might be little spots of alcohol on the piece. To tell the difference between alcohol stains and real scratches, I take a cotton bud, soak it in alcohol, and gently rub the top of the piece so that it looks really clean. Once the biggest scratches have been removed and there are only micro scratches left, I'll clean my zinc block again and put a paste of 1/4 of a micron on it to remove the very small scratches.